But what about all the other behaviors that we chalk up to, oh, they're moody teenagers, or, oh, they're just, acting out, or, oh, poor parenting. Like before we looked at food dyes for years, we tried behavioral modification. We tried therapy. We tried all the things because we blamed ourselves first.
Right.
Like we're the reason why he's acting this way. And then it was like, oh no, it's the food he's eating. So we behavioral modification all day long, punishing children all day long, doing all these things isn't going to do anything when they're jacked up like that.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Reshape Your Health podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Morgan Nolte, and today I'm interviewing Dr. Rebecca Bevans, and she has her PhD in Cognitive Neuroscience and her master's in child psychology. Now you might be wondering, okay, why is a geriatric physical therapist, talking to a child psychologist? And it's a really interesting episode today. So she is a professor of psychology at Western Nevada College. And I actually found her on YouTube through her TEDx talk. And when her son complained that he couldn't focus because his brain buzzed, she knew that something was wrong. And she spent many months trying to figure out what was the cause and how to help him. She talks all about it in her TEDx talk. I highly encourage you, if you enjoy this episode, definitely check out that talk. It's one of the best ones that I've seen personally. It's called The Effects of Artificial Food Dyes, and you can find it on YouTube or in the show notes for this episode. Dr. Bevans, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to have this conversation. And full disclosure, I found you on YouTube right after I had finished reading the book Metabolical by Dr. Robert Lustig, in which I loved, by the way, like top 3 books. But I don't know if he ever mentioned food dyes. He certainly mentioned additives. He may have mentioned dyes, but he didn't go into depth. And it didn't hook in my brain until I watched your TEDx talk on like, ooh, this is really important. So I was listening to it. I was driving home from daycare with the kids and I said, I bet the gum that I'm chewing has a food dye in it. Sure enough, I look at it and I'm like, dang it, there's blue in here. So that's kind of the funny story of how I stumbled upon you. And I'm really glad that I did. So let's get started just with this whole journey that started, over a decade ago now. And what was going on to make you really dive into this area of food dyes and the harmful effects that they can have on our just behavior?
Yeah, well, I'd had no intention of going down this road. I never thought food dyes were a bad thing. I mean, the FDA approved them and they're in all these foods and we give them to children, so there must be fine, right? So our child was, and I'll say this, I nursed him for a long time, it was over a year. We made all of his food. He had healthy foods from the very beginning, but then, around 3, 4, they start getting into going to places, having cupcakes, eating things. And so he was always kind of, I don't want to say a hyper kid, but a very active kid. And we just thought that was who he was. And even though as a baby, he was a really chill, easygoing baby, but then he became really active. So that's who he is. Well, by the time he got into school, it was getting kind of worse. And we thought, well, it's just because of the school environment. But then he's like 7 years old in 2nd grade and he just couldn't focus and he couldn't focus and he couldn't focus. And his doctors were like, well, he needs to get into the gifted program that doesn't start until 3rd grade. He's a smart kid and he's bored. So we kept getting this brush off on why his behavior is this way. Well, then he wasn't focusing, couldn't focus. I would take an hour and a half to do a simple paper that I knew he could do. And so he said to me, I can't focus. Cause I was like, bud, come on, let's just focus. He's like, I can't focus. My brain buzzes. I was like, whoa, like brains aren't supposed to buzz. I know this neuroscience degree. I know that brains aren't supposed to buzz. Yeah. So let's talk about this, explain this to me. And so I started to try to do research. And so there's no research anywhere on brain buzzing. And I looked over all the research articles and I came across, I finally just jumped on Google and was like Googling brain buzzing and came across a blog that was done by a 15-year-old who talked about how red dye 40 made her brain buzz. That was like the only connection that I could possibly find to brain buzzing, and so I thought, okay, fine, let's test this. Let's pull the red 40 from his diet and see if it does anything for the brain buzzing. And sure enough, within a week, brain buzzing was gone. And a lot of his ADHD type behaviors were gone. The inability to sit still. This is a kid who couldn't sit still while he was eating dinner. He couldn't sit still while he was sleeping. And so we like, okay, fine, we'll pull it. He calmed down and the brain buzzing went away. And we were like, okay, good. So there's the problem solved. So he can't do red 40. Red 40 is talked a lot about in the literature. It's kind of well known that red 40 causes reaction in kids. It's more talked about than any of the other colors. So it didn't occur to me that now we have a problem with other colors as well. So instead of eating all the red things that he used to eat, he would eat the yellow things. Now, yellow is also pretty insidious in that it's in pickles.
Oh,
yeah. It's in pickles. It's in a lot of foods. Some things you wouldn't expect it to be in, it's in. Popcorn, bagels, just bagels from the bakery at the grocery store. So we're not even talking processed, right? So it was an increase now in eating some of the yellow stuff when with an increase in eating the red stuff. We went to Hawaii and he ate, and so it was over the Christmas break when he was in second grade. Well, after second grade, we went to Hawaii. And so over the Christmas break, is when we did the red 40 removal.
Mm-hmm.
And then within 6 months, so I'm seeing an increase in some of these agitation behaviors. He's getting mad for no reason. I ask him to, we have like turn the TV off and come to dinner. And he would just get really mad for no reason. I mean, like really excessively mad for no reason. And he would scratch at himself and he would swing on me and just overreact emotionally. And so again, we could write it off as, well, he's maybe going through a stage or some phase or something's going on, something else is going on that's bothering him. We had him in therapy. Nothing was working. He was just very angry all the time. So then we went to Hawaii and he was eating shaved ice with grandpa and granny. And he was doing the yellow syrup, which is just loaded with color. And he was doing it every day, if not twice a day, because we're in Hawaii and it's vacation. And yeah, so then we start seeing the deceitful behaviors, and the meltdowns. Oh my gosh, the meltdowns. And now the meltdowns, instead of happening once a week, were happening 3 times a day. And it just got really, really bad. So we came home from that and I started doing some more research, found one published research article on yellow, just yellow. And it suggested that there might be an increase in agitation. So I was like, all right, fine. We're just pulling them off all of food dyes, everything, just no more food dyes at all starting today. Went through the house, pulled everything that had any kind of color in it, and no more. And then, like I mentioned in my talk, he crashed. I akin it to being on a drug because it was like watching a meth addict coming off of meth. He slept all the time. He craved cheese and yogurt, which was very interesting. I've heard from other parents that their kids kind of went through similar. They wanted milk and cheese or milk and yogurt. And so I'm not sure the correlation there, but very interesting. And so, yeah, it took a while. It took months for him to completely recover. And the whole time I felt like, the parent of the year. Why didn't I check this sooner? How come I didn't catch this? I should know better. Oh my God, what did I do to my child? We saw some emotional stunting for a little bit. It took him a little while to catch up. It took him some time to completely recover because it was like he was drugged. He was high for years. And it never occurred to me that dyes could possibly be doing that. So I ended up learning everything I possibly could about dyes and pulling all the research that was out there. And in 2019, we went to a symposium in California. So the Office of Health Hazard Assessment in California was reviewing the effects of artificial food dyes on children to see if this was a problem. And so they pulled researchers from all around the world. Some came from the UK. Of course, all the big candy manufacturers were there. Coca-Cola was there. The FDA was there. And of all of them, the ones that were least supportive of the idea that this could be a problem was the FDA. Yeah, we had several interesting arguments with them over this. Well, it didn't hurt rats, and rat studies didn't cause any brain changes, therefore it's fine. Even though their rat studies were not even correlational to children's studies. And so, yeah. So my son was the only one there that actually has a reaction to food dyes. There were researchers, there were a lot of researchers that look at ADHD and study ADHD who have seen these correlations with artificial food coloring. And some interesting things came out of that. He did stand up and talk, which was nice because, yeah, I don't remember how old he was, 13, 14, 13. Yeah, he stood up and spoke. He was actually upset at something that someone said. So yeah, well, it's in medicines, it's in medications. So if he gets sick, thank goodness he doesn't get sick often, but when he does, I have to go rounds and rounds with the, the back and forth with the pharmacist to find a drug that doesn't have dye in it that he can take. Like we've had to change medications that the doctor suggested through the doctor. Like I'm spending hours talking to the doctor and the pharmacist and back and forth to find something. But so from this symposium that lasted a couple days, they published an over 300-page report. And the report says that there is sufficient evidence to suggest that artificial food dyes do in fact affect children that are outside of the ADHD, because again, would say, well, children with ADHD can be affected. And now they're saying, no, children outside of this group can also be affected. So this was a huge, huge win. I think they're trying to pass some legislation to regulate artificial colors in California.
Wow.
I am really hoping it goes, because if it goes, it'll go nationwide, because companies are not going to make things for California and the rest of the country. So we're hoping. But one of the other things that came out of that was really interesting, and this would affect your area too, is that about half the children grow out of it, the other half don't, which means the half that don't grow out of their reaction to food dyes grow up into adults that have reaction to food dyes. So we do have a population of adults that have no idea that the anxiety that they're experiencing might be agitated by the food that they're eating, the depression, the ADHD type behaviors, the inability to focus, their aggression or anger. Those things can be fueled by what they're eating.
Yeah. And I think just as a parent too, I mean, goodness gracious, that is so powerful to catch this stuff early and instill healthier habits and be able to feed our children in a way that really supports their mental and emotional and developmental health. But then we have so many grandparents that listen to this show too. And we're definitely going to talk about the role that food pushing by grandma or grandparents can play. And I think that's going to be a really interesting part of this conversation. Now, before we go there, I had some follow-up questions from what you just said and from your TEDx talk. My question was, when you were going through like the traditional medical system with your son to try to get him the help that he needed, what was the conversation like around what he was eating or what he was drinking, or was there any conversation?
No. So his pediatrician early on, my OB said, do you want the best pediatrician around who is going to retire when he's 5, or do you want a new pediatrician who'll be here for his life? And I said, give me the best pediatrician until he's 5. And so we had a wonderful pediatrician. He chalked up a lot of his behaviors to the fact that he is intelligent. He is on that other end spectrum of intelligence. He went from 8th grade to college. So he's a smart kid. So they chalked that up to that. He's just kind of the out of the box kind of kid. Never, ever mentioned, maybe we should put him on medications, never mentioned, nothing, never asked about the food. We had pulled high fructose corn syrup from his diet for when he was, early on, really early. I think he was like 2 or 3 when we just removed it from our house. And we cook all the time. So we cook most of our stuff. However, there's still the things that kids eat and that a lot of American families have. And so, no, there wasn't any discussion. Now, when he switched pediatricians, when his retired and we have his current pediatrician, it didn't occur to her either, but she was wonderful when I started to figure things out. And I came to her and said, this is affecting him. And she put it in his chart. So immediately put in red 40 was the first thing. And then when we figured out that the rest of them caused a problem, put it in there too. But we had to switch pediatricians 1 year because of insurance. So I had to make some phone calls. And my question was, how do you feel about artificial food dyes and their effects on children? And if I got, well, they don't affect children at all. So thank you very much and move on. Until I found one who said, I know nothing. It sounds like you know more than me and I'm happy to listen to you.
Isn't that interesting?
Yes.
Wow.
So we had him for a year. He was great. And then as soon as we could switch back, when our insurance switched again, we switched back to our old doctor and are comfortable there. But found dentists, had to change dentists 3 times until we found a dentist that would use no stuff on his teeth, no fluoride with color, no polishing. He just gets the pumice. He doesn't get anything else with color in it. So, and they started to switch over their entire office to dye-free stuff for all the kids. So that was wonderful. So
yeah,
that was great. So that was, it just takes extra work as a parent to ensure that the healthcare providers are going to abide by this, but a lot of them just don't know. More so now than 10 years ago. I think that those discussions are coming out more. Baskin Robbins removed all the dyes out of their ice cream.
I didn't know that. Interesting.
No, they did not announce it. They did it quietly about 2-3 years ago.
Huh.
And they didn't announce it because what happened was when other companies have done it and announced it, there was a public backlash. And so they just didn't announce it, it's fine. But yeah, so I think there's more of an understanding that this may have an effect. There's more of a question of maybe it does. But still not enough parents know.
Right. Or providers. I see so often where someone goes to the doctor and the doctor has 5 minutes with them, maybe 10 minutes. And it's hard, they are trained to diagnose and then prescribe or diagnose and refer. And so I think just getting this information out and helping people understand if you're seeing these symptoms, this dyes should be a flag in your head. Hey, maybe it's dyes, instead of let's refer to this therapist or let's go to this specialist or this and this and this. And it's like at some point, I really hope that physicians across all ages start talking more about food and start talking about how food impacts behavior and physical health, because medications aren't going to fix the problem. They are a Band-Aid and a downstream solution in most cases. So I think that I'm not anti-medicine, but I'm like, let's really do everything that we can naturally, so that we don't have compounding effects of multiple medications. Because I'm a geriatric PT, so I saw that all the time, like 38 medications, I kid you not. And that's a problem. So I think that the next thing that I wanted to ask and tease out a little bit, those who follow me know that I'm all about lowering insulin, which requires we really reduce added sugar and natural sugars. And so when I kind of first started listening to your TED Talk, that was something that was really intriguing to me, was you didn't really mention sugar at all related to the behaviors. And so I wanted to know what your personal experience and research was as it relates to sugars and behavior, and then food dyes and behavior. So kind of teasing out the differences there.
Okay. Yeah. So when we first noticed that he's acting excessive, um, and it was not, it was an up and down, like especially with the red, it was up and down. I thought, okay, this isn't a consistent behavior. What's he eating? Right. It's the first thing I thought about is what's he eating? What's he eating? So we thought sugar. Okay. So we pulled sugar and saw no changes in his behavior. And then
it was still up and down, kind of up
yeah,
and down. Yeah.
Yeah. Because for him, he's so sensitive. One tiny little piece of red 40 or any of the other food colorings, one little bit, and it's enough to set him off. So we've tested sugar several times over the years. Yes, it makes him hyper, or it can increase his mood.
Yeah.
But it doesn't change his mood. Like he was psychotic when he was eating food dyes. And I know it's extreme to say, but it was this form of psychosis. And we don't see that when he eats sugar. So yeah, for one of the first things people usually will come at me with is, well, it's the sugar. So we tried that. We pulled the sugar, and it wasn't like he was eating a lot of sugar anyway. And the sugar didn't have an effect on him. We give him the sugar. Sugar doesn't have an effect on him. And we give him the dye, and it has an effect on him. And we remove the dye, and then the effects disappear. So that's kind of how we tease that one out. So yes, no, sugar is definitely not the best thing in the world for you. That's for sure. However, it's not causing psychosis the same way. It causes other physical issues, but not that psychological issue that we were seeing with my son. So again, he's 17 now. He eats what he eats when I'm not around. I cannot control everything he's eating. Yeah. And I saw him walking across campus with a Coke the other day, and it's like, of course you are. But again, it doesn't bother him. It barely makes a dent in anything now with him. Whereas he went from 100 pounds, he's now like, 220 and 6'2". And the same amount that bothered him at 100 pounds is now bothering him. So we're well past this isn't the sugar thing. So
that
yes.
I have to stop there though, because you said in your TEDx talk about the weight gain, and I thought that was so fascinating that he was struggling to gain weight. And so I think this is really pertinent. Like if you know a child or a grandchild that's struggling to gain weight, can you speak on that really quick? That was interesting.
It was weird. So he was so thin, and he was very active, and he was in gymnastics, but you could see his ribs through his shirt. His cousin, who is only 18 days younger, asked me one day when he was like, they were 6. She's like, why is he so skinny? And it seemed like he was just really skinny, and for the amount of food that he would eat. So when he got older, and we talked about some of the effects that yellow had on him, and that was when we saw the weight change, when the weight started to come back on. So he was a healthy weight. He said that his body was always hot, and his metabolism was always going, and his brain is always going. And that's the problem also with yellow for him, is that his brain's going 90 miles an hour. So when I asked that question of what does that mean, he says, well, all the thoughts in the world have already gone through my head today. And so he's racing. So his metabolism's racing. So as soon as we pulled that out, we saw this metabolism drop. And so he put on, so instead of 6 pounds in a year, he put on 6 pounds in 6 weeks. And has maintained a healthier weight from that point. He's a big kid. He's dad's built very big guy, and he's built like dad. And so he's just not, he never was built to be super skinny kid. So now he is where he should be, and so much taller. And he hasn't had weight issues since then. Like he hasn't had that rapid weight gain. For after that 6 pound increase, after that, he went back to gaining weight at a normal rate. So it was an interesting reaction that we didn't expect to see. So it was having, and so I talked to my endocrinologist and he goes, well, it sounds like it was having an effect on his metabolism.
Yeah. That's really
So
interesting because the brain does use so much energy. I don't know the percentage, but it does. So as I was,
about
go ahead.
30, it's about 30% of
Is it?
what, yeah.
I was thinking like 30 to 40. So you're probably right. So this is kind of crazy too.
Okay.
The toothpaste that we still use for our children has blue because it's not out yet. And I'm like, it's not, they're not that sensitive. I'm not going to change it out. But they get crazy before bedtime. I tell you what, we are friends and we have this app called Marco Polo. Have you heard of that one? It's just kind of like you video each other and you can send videos. And then when they have time, they view the video. And it's a good way to keep in touch with people across the country. And we'll send videos of like our kids just off the walls right before bed. And they weren't like that 10 minutes ago. And I'm like, is it the toothpaste? Like, or am I just crazy? Like, so is that just such a minute amount that it might not really matter? I obviously have to change the toothpaste and see, but I was just wondering if you'd heard of that effect from a toothpaste.
Sure. Well, sublingual, right? We all know it's sublingual medications. As soon as you have it in your mouth and underneath your tongue, it goes into your system really quickly. It's actually one of the fastest delivery systems that we can have for some medications. So yes, absolutely. Having that dye in their mouth, there's more in it than you think, but having that in their mouth will have an effect on their behavior. We sprayed my kiddo down with, we had a reaction on vacation once, and I had sprayed him down with my sunblock that has bronzer in it. Didn't even think. And this was only a couple of years ago, so I still make mistakes. And he had a reaction while we're on vacation, which is usually what happens because he comes across something when we're traveling, but we couldn't pinpoint where. Normally we could.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, maybe one of the places that we stopped actually had dye and they just lied to us or something. But so we get back home and we live very close to Tahoe. And so we were up in Tahoe and I sprayed him down again and he gets in the water and he looks around and there's color on the top of the water. And he was immediately like, oh no, is there dye in that? Well, first ingredient is blue one.
What?
First ingredient.
Oh my gosh.
So of course he gets it off of his system as fast as he can, or it's off his body, but it's there. And I also have an article that was published research demonstrating that the active ingredient in sunblock will end up in your bloodstream within 24 hours. So whatever you put on your skin will end up in your bloodstream, can end up in your bloodstream. And that's all it took. So if it can go through your skin and affect,
it can certainly go through a little bit in the mouth.
Yep, a little bit in your mouth.
Well, I'm going to buy natural toothpaste today.
Well,
thank you, Amazon app.
Well,
I want to see. I'm curious. I know I don't have to, but like I really want to see.
And there's a lot of toothpaste. Crest has some that are white. So we've gone through the gamut of toothpastes. He finally has settled on one that he likes. And for the longest time, I think he was using the doTERRA toothpaste that he loved. When they get older, deodorant is fun. For some reason, men's deodorant is blue. I don't understand why. So it took a while for us to find some deodorant that wasn't blue, because that is on your skin. Shampoo, conditioner, face lotions. For some reason, face lotions can have it in there as well. So yes, we have. Oh, and he was a theater kid. And all of his makeup.
So all that paint and the makeup. Yeah.
So I had to go and get all mica based makeup for him and use all the mica based stuff because we had a reaction on that. He painted his nails for one of his productions that he was in, had a reaction from that.
Just very sensitive to it. So I think that's kind of my next question is like, okay, let's say we have 100 kids or 1,000 kids. How many of those kids are going to have some sort of sensitivity to food dye?
We don't know.
Okay.
I did unofficially, I looked at the math on some things. Kids that are having a reaction to food dyes are having behavioral issues. So if you look at the diagnosed rates for ADHD, oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder, intermittent explosive disorder, some of the main childhood disorders, if you're looking at behavioral disorders, you're looking at over 1% of the children, way more. I think ADHD kids, was it 11% of children are diagnosed with ADHD. So I go conservative so I don't sound like I'm overreacting. So if we looked at 1% of children under the age of 18, we're looking at 1 million kids.
In America?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So not still a lot. I mean, 1% is still a lot. If we're looking at, if we assumed that every child with ADHD is allergic to artificial food dyes or reactive, which I highly doubt, but if it's 11%. So we're talking over 11 million children.
Yeah.
Of the kids that are reactive, there is again a sliding scale of reaction.
Right.
I was told by some researchers at that symposium that my son, he would consider him allergic because his reaction is extreme.
Mm-hmm.
I was calling him reactive. If we call him reactive, because he's not anaphylactic.
Yeah.
But it will put him straight into a psychosis.
Yeah.
So he's very extreme, which I think is what made it a little easier for me to figure out.
Absolutely.
Is because I could not talk away all of the behaviors.
Yeah.
Some people are like, oh, my kid, like I see videos of children throwing fits in the back seat and having meltdowns, and people are like, oh, bad parenting and all this stuff. And all my heart breaks. I was just like, oh my God, that kid's probably having a reaction, because it is an extreme behavior that you don't necessarily see. But what about all the other behaviors that we chalk up to, oh, they're moody teenagers, or, oh, they're just, acting out, or, oh, poor parenting. Like before we looked at food dyes for years, we tried behavioral modification. We tried therapy. We tried all the things because we blamed ourselves first.
Right.
Like we're the reason why he's acting this way. And then it was like, oh no, it's the food he's eating. So behavioral modification all day long, punishing children all day long, doing all these things isn't going to do anything when they're jacked up like that. So it's probably well over 1 million kids. Now, then the question goes to how many adults,
right?
So 18, half of those million kids turn into adults, but we have way more adults than we have children. So now we have millions of adults.
Yep. And I think for me, it just reinforces the importance of like whole unprocessed foods.
Yeah.
Like an avocado is green, but it doesn't have green food dye. A banana is yellow, but it doesn't have yellow dye. An apple has a red skin, but it doesn't have a red dye. And it's like, you mentioned as well that there are all sorts of, quote unquote processed foods. Like parents sometimes want a shortcut that don't have the dyes, that have the natural coloring, just like Baskin Robbins. So even if you're not, on the whole foods approach, you can still, like you guys did, reduce the dyes or eliminate the dyes. So I think the next question that I had is, okay, maybe a parent or a grandparent suspects that their child has an allergy or a reaction to the dye. How do they know? How do you test?
Well, so any kid that's having some emotional reaction, I mean, every kid I think should be tested, but especially when kids are being having these emotional reactions or skin problems or ear problems. So another thing, our kid went through, he had 9 ear infections in 10 months before they put the tubes in his ears. And that just popped up when he was 4. Well, what happened when he was 4? So he was eating more processed foods. So later I find out, well, if he's having this reaction, it could very well have affected his ear. So any kind of skin reaction, emotional reaction, psychological reaction, and what you do is you remove the food coloring for 2 weeks. So we pulled him cold turkey and he crashed. So part of me likes to tell parents to do what you're doing. Wean him off of it. If you want to test him, great. Don't feed him anything with artificial colors for 2 weeks. Of course, it's easier to do in the summer when you have control over their as long as you're not going to other people's houses and things. But you'll know in a week. You really will see an effect in a week. The longest we've seen with kids is yellow, and yellow can last 5 days in their system. So after about 5 or 6 days, and you start to see it taper off, they
Mhm.
shouldn't have any of that reaction in their system anymore. So by a week, if what they're eating was having an effect on their behavior, you should see a decrease in the behavior.
Yep.
So like I said in my TED talk, he was suicidal at 7. And within 1 week of being off of all the colors, that went away completely. And he has never mentioned it again, never talked about it. Now, and as he got older, he explained, I didn't want to die, but I didn't want to feel like this anymore.
Yeah.
I hate the way I felt. So they feel different in about a week. I say 2 just to be
Yep.
safe. But you can take all of your stuff that has colors in it, just mark it, and then don't feed it to them. The other way is if you think you want to just pull it anyway, do what you do. All right, well, we're going to be done with this toothpaste soon.
Yeah.
If you're seeing an immediate reaction after some things, you might want to ditch it earlier. Green and blue seem to have quicker reactions within a half an hour or less. Yellow and green, or yellow and red are what are called azo dyes. They actually have slower reactions in kids. And this was backed up by a chemist, because they talked about how they break down. Green and blue don't really break down where the other two do. And so that breakdown of the other two seems to be what is fueling some of this behavior. But if you're almost done with that cereal, finish the cereal, replace it with one that doesn't have colors, and just kind of start to replace the things in your house with brands that don't have food color. Pickles, there's actually a lot of different pickles now on the shelf that don't have artificial colors. Different stores, Aldi is really good with not having artificial colors. Trader Joe's on the West Coast doesn't have a lot of artificial colors in their stuff. And then just, the organic, that's safe. There's no artificial colors in organic stuff on the shelves. So we have a lot of organic food in our house, just because if I'm grabbing stuff and I don't feel like reading every single label,
Yeah.
it's good. So
and you're looking for like the word red. So if people are completely new to this, maybe they're not currently reading food labels, they're looking at the ingredients list on the nutrition panel.
Yeah.
And what specifically should they be looking for?
So it'll say red 40, yellow 5, green 3, blue 1. It'll have a color and a number after it. I will say this, I did come across one where it was a word, and it was the chemical word for the yellow, and it was not yellow 5. And so I was tricked once. But in all of 10 years, I came across that once, and I cannot think of the word right now, but I can look it up, but it's not common. Normally it will be red 40, yellow 5, green 3. If you see any of those, then just put it back. When we go to restaurants or places and I have to ask a question, I will say, can you read the ingredients and look for a color with a number after it? And that seems to be the easiest way for people to understand. So red something, and it's a pound sign and a number, and that's what you look for. And they have to, in the United States, put that on there, or it'll say artificial color added. And then I just drop it.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. So artificial color, or the red, green, blue, yellow. I really hope they don't start getting sneaky. They do that with sugar, like, over 200 names for added sugar now to kind of trick people. So I hope they don't do that with like food dyes, because that would make, obviously whole food is the simplest solution there, but it would still make, everyone, at least I do, and busy moms, we like some solutions there. So would you recommend going one dye at a time, or all the dyes for the like the 2-week trial?
So if you're going to do 2-week trial and you're going to do it in 2 weeks, then I would pull everything.
Okay.
Just pull all of them. And then you can slowly reincorporate. You can give them something with red in it and see how they act. You can, and then if there's no reaction, or if there is a reaction, wait a few days and then try something with blue. Kind of go back to when you were feeding babies and you went with green foods, and, you did that process of introduction of foods and then removal of foods and introduction of new foods. So you do the same thing. You let them have something with a specific color in it. So like I think Alex was clean for 6 months, and then we were at a Thai restaurant and he wanted green tea ice cream and assured me that he would be fine. He was 8. And I was like, well, it's Friday. like,
Yeah.
I'm a researcher. Let's give it a
Yeah.
shot. By the time we got home, he was bouncing off the walls. And so the next morning, I'm like, so are we going to eat that again? No. And he's never touched it again. So, yeah, I would do all of them and then wait and see. The thing about pulling all colors at once is that if they are reacting, they may crash.
Yeah.
And by crash, I mean sleep. And mine would sleep all night, come out, pass out on the couch all day. And he just didn't want to do anything. And he was lethargic and his body hurt. And he really was going through some withdrawals for like a week. And then he came out of it. So you may see that. You may see a drop in energy. You may see a drop in their behavior. Now, yes, they shouldn't be eating sugar. However, you don't, if your household still has sugar, you can still give them sugar. You're not going to see that kind of change from just the sugar. So
yeah, you said there was a difference there. So probably like the summertime would be the best. Otherwise, like Christmas break, maybe fall break or spring break, just to kind of give the kids a little bit more space to kind of come down from it if they have a crash like that. So my next question is, okay, so you know that your son has an allergic reaction of sorts to the food dyes. How do you, as a mom, influence the school?
So the teachers that have been fantastic. So when we first approached his second grade teacher after he came back from winter break, we said he can't eat red 40. So we brought other snacks instead and said, here, you can put these aside and you can give these to him. Just make sure he's not getting any red. He was getting other colors. But after that, I have never had any pushback by any teacher that I have ever come in contact with. They're the ones that I've said, he's reacting to food dyes. And she's like, oh, lots of them are.
Yes,
they see it.
Right?
They see what the kids are eating and they see how they behave before lunch and then they see how they behave after lunch.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I have gotten tremendous support. So we found my kid was loving fruit snacks. And so we found an all natural organic fruit snacks. We bought a humongous box. I brought them and gave them to her and said, here, if you're handing out snacks, you can give him these. And you know, any other kid, just let me know when you're getting low. And we brought other snacks. We made sure that he never ate school lunches because I went rounds and rounds with the company that provided the lunches and everything had yellow in it. And so he never ate that. So we just packed his own and we always had extra snacks in there that in case he wanted to hand them out or save them in his desk for later. So there was never an issue. His classmates started, they knew well, and when we did the TED Talk, he was in 4th grade and they all watched it live.
They watched it live
because we were live streaming it.
Yeah.
And they were right down the street. So that was pretty impactful. But after that, it was great to see them come over and they would read and they'd be like, you can't have this. Oh, you can have this. And they would give him things that he could have. And then parents started they would bring in cupcakes, but they would bring one white cupcake for him instead of the colored ones for everyone else. So he didn't ever have a problem with school. School was never the issue. The only issue we had was with family. And I love my mom, but I don't think she believed me when we pulled him off red. And so she had him up there at her house. She lives in Tahoe and she gave him a red vine and he ran around in circles until he passed out on the floor. And she was like, wow, okay, we're not doing this anymore. And so she immediately jumped on the bandwagon and there was no more problems with that. Yep. So, and then, Grandpa and Granny Granny was wonderful. Granny was from from South Africa and the UK. And so plenty of foods without dyes. And so she would go to a specialty store and buy him all sorts of fun things that he couldn't eat, and all loaded with sugar. Yeah. But he had things that he could have that weren't full of dyes. So we really didn't have much of a problem when it came to the schools. The schools have been wonderful. It was more of like, and when what I've heard from parents, it's the family. It's really difficult when kids are in a divorced family and dad
Yeah.
gives dyes and mom does not. So mom is spending time detoxing the kids and then sending them back to dad. So it's helpful when family works together on this. Even if they think you're crazy. I mean, one of the reasons I did the TED Talk is because I have a degree. I'm not a crazy mom. I mean, I might be a crazy mom, but
Aren't we all?
yeah, I'm a crazy mom with a degree in this area. And trust me, this isn't a crazy mom thing. This
Exactly.
is a serious thing. And so, I have had parents go, thank you. Nobody listens to me. And then I showed them your talk and like, they listen to me now. It's like, yeah. So that's why we did it, so that other parents have that backup, because it does take a little. We were in the ER and this woman, I don't remember if she was the doctor or if she was the nurse, comes out with Tylenol, bright red Tylenol. I'm like, oh, he can't have that. He's allergic to artificial food dyes. And she just rolls her eyes and walks off. So I carry medications on me that have no colors in them. I carry, Tums that have no color in them, like antacids. I carry all the things on me all the time, because if he needs something, we have
Right. You want to be prepared.
to be prepared.
I
But
think this is like so interesting once you know about it. It's just like it was kind of like added sugar for me. So added sugar was the first
mhm.
thing. And then it was refined seed oils that I would like
Mm,
screen my labels for. So those are really inflammatory, like the canola, the cottonseed, the soybean. And
mhm.
so it was kind of a tiered approach for me of added sugar and then the refined oils. And now you're looking at food labels for dyes, and I'm like, oh my gosh, these are in so many things and so many even non food products.
Mhm.
So it's been really eye opening for me. And I think that, among other things, this is kind of like the next step in our family's health journey to kind of clean up our products and like our toothpaste and just kind of pay more attention to it and screen the labels. And I think that listeners will be really, really surprised how frequently dyes are added to food.
Yeah.
Now, just to kind of wrap this up,
Okay.
I know that you mentioned before we started talking online that research in the US on this is really sparse.
Yeah.
So, can you speak to that just a little bit? And I think that was really surprising to me that a lot of the research on this was done outside of the US.
Mhm.
Were there any other major surprises along the way for you?
Um, the lack of research is what really got me. Most of the research has been done over 35 years ago.
Yeah.
And there was a one study done in the UK, and I met with the researcher who conducted that. It was done in 2012. But since they use dyes that are not approved for US, they used US approved dyes and non-US approved dyes. That was enough for the FDA to ignore it.
Hmm.
I was surprised at how uninterested the FDA is in looking into this.
Yeah.
Um, and how uninterested companies are in removing it. There are a lot of companies that make foods for the UK that have no dyes, like M&Ms,
Yep.
but they make them with dyes here. So it's not like they can't. They
Yeah.
absolutely can. They just won't. I was also surprised at how intense the US, how much they love their brightly colored foods. When Trix pulled their artificial colors out of their food, out of their cereal, people complained so much they had to put it back in.
Wow.
So that was surprising. But yes, there's no money in research right now. Like
Yeah.
we have some independent researchers trying to raise money to do some studies. There's some brain studies. I would like to get some brain scans of my son on and off dyes, so that we can
Yeah.
show you what his brain looks like.
Yeah. That'd be fascinating.
Yeah, and it would be helpful. So I mean, if
Yes.
you saw a brain scan of what a child's brain looks like when they're eating artificial food colors, and it looks very different when they're not, that's enough for you to not want to do that anymore. And so yeah, I'm just really, really shocked at the fact that there's no studies right now. So we were hoping that the report that came out in California spurs some more research. I'm hoping that the discussions that the California legislature are going to have over this spurs some more research out of this. But usually, research goes where money is, and right now companies don't want to spend the money to pull it out. And logistically, I will say this in defense, logistically, right now, we do not have a good substitute. A lot of the natural food dyes that are out there do not stand up to pH or temperature. So you can use beet
Interesting.
juice in some things that you're not baking, but as soon as you bake it,
Yeah.
you lose it. So there is a company, Microma, that is working on all natural food dyes from fungi that are sustainable, and they will hold up pH and temperature. And they have almost all the beautiful colors together. And they've worked for the last 3 years on this and are making huge strides. So I am very excited about that. We're in good contact with them.
Yeah.
One of the owners we're good friends now, because we just can't wait as soon as that is out. And there is an option for these big companies to
Yes.
use something else. Now there's no excuse.
Right. And
So
I was wondering too, so just in case, we probably should have started here, but they are just made in a lab, right? Like these artificial dyes, they're just made in a lab.
they're petroleum based.
Okay, that's important.
To
We
make it
should have
even
talked about that at the
to
beginning.
make it even worse, these are petroleum based chemicals.
Mm.
Yes, they have a benzene ring. So anybody that knows anything about chemistry knows benzene rings are bad. They're not healthy at all. So yeah, they are all chemical. They're all labs. There's nothing even remotely close to being natural. They provide no nutritional value. They
No.
do
Mm-mm.
nothing except change the color of the food.
And are they
Yeah.
on the GRAS list, the generally recognized as safe list by the FDA? I mean, they can't be,
I
they
think
have to be
so.
approved, you know,
Yeah.
but I just
Yeah.
wanted to point out that just because something is on the GRAS list does not make it mean that it's healthy. Like trans fats were on the list.
Yeah.
And that was one of the rare situations in the book Metabolical. I believe it was Dr. Robert Lustig talked about how those got on and off the list. I think that's the book. But yeah, they removed trans fats from the GRAS list in 2015 because they were causing cardiovascular events.
Yeah.
And it's like, so it's on there now. I'm really fascinated to see how the FDA develops and like you said, what the California legislation does. And is that going to be the first domino in the US for kind of food companies to say, oh, we need to take this more seriously. But I know that, you know, this has been a decade or more in the making of work, you know, for you and your family. And I feel like I just really wanted to acknowledge your work and thank you so much for having the courage and the bravery for you and your son and your family to share your story. So can you let our listeners know where they can learn more about you? And we'll be sure again to link up the website and the TED Talk in the notes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I do have a website that I need to add a couple more research. There have been a couple studies that looked at how much dye is in foods, and so I need to add those. But I have livingdyefree.org. It's an informational site, and you can reach me through there, I do believe. Also, I do want to say, if you want a lot more information about dyes, the Center for the Science and the Public Interest is a wonderful resource, and they have been working behind the scenes for years and years to get dyes removed from companies and from products. For more information, the Center for the Science and the Public Interest has a fantastic resource called Food Dyes: A Rainbow of Risks. It's a great PDF. It really talks about each dye and how they're structured and what they do on a chemical level, and some of the research for cancer correlations too. So Center for the Science and the Public Interest is a wonderful resource. They're also huge advocates for removing food dyes. So
Perfect. Oh,
yeah.
okay. I will link that resource in the show notes, either on the blog, the podcast, and YouTube, so that you guys can just get that PDF and kind of dive through it if you really want a good resource.
And then, yeah, livingdyefree.org is a place that has a lot of resources. So there's the links to the research that's been done, so that this isn't made up. This is a
That
real
it's
thing.
mainstream medical practice, that if a child or an adult is having some sort of, you know, behavioral disturbances, that this is immediately looked at, because how simple is that? 2 weeks. It's free. You know,
it's free, and there's no negative side effects from removing certain foods from your diet for a couple of weeks. So yes, there's no problems with that. It's better than putting them on a medication. And I will say most of the medications have food dyes. So much better idea than just to try to just try to remove it for a couple weeks and see how you feel. Remove it from your foods
Yeah.
for all the adults, not just the kids.
Yep.
I mean, kids are bombarded with food colors more than adults, but adults still eat them. So,
yeah. Well, thank you so much. I've really
Thank you for
enjoyed this
having me.
interview.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we'll talk soon. Bye.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.